I had just taken the photo, barefoot on the porch of my brand new beach house, the Atlantic stretching wide behind me. A glass of rosé in one hand, wind in my hair, peace in my chest. I didn't even think twice about the caption before I posted it. Birthday gift to myself, 32, and finally choosing me. I set my phone down and stared out at the water, feeling more grounded than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't hoping for a call. I didn't need their validation. I was my own witness now. Then it started. First, the notifications, then the missed calls, then the texts. By the time I picked up my phone, my mother had messaged 11 times. My father sent a single line, "We need to talk, now." And Brandon, my golden boy brother, commented publicly, "Is this really necessary, Elena? Throw." Was as if the silence I'd grown used to suddenly shattered, not into apologies or reconnection, but rage. They hadn't remembered my birthday. They hadn't called. But the moment I gave myself something beautiful, they were furious. Not because I had isolated them, but because I had finally realized I didn't need them to celebrate me. And that, for the first time in my life, was my real birthday gift. The sea breeze picked up, rustling the white linen curtains in my new living room. I took a deep breath of salt air, trying to center myself. I'd expected today to feel different, but not like this. Not with the storm of messages lighting up my phone like firecrackers. My brother's text was the one that stung most. Mom's crying. Why would you do this to the family? To the family. As if my act of self-celebration was somehow an attack on them. As if buying myself this small slice of paradise with money I'd earned through years of thankless overtime was somehow a betrayal. I walked inside, setting my wine glass on the kitchen counter. Quartz, just like I'd always wanted. Everything here was mine. Chosen by me, paid for by me. No compromises, no explanations needed. The week before, when I'd signed the closing papers on this little beachfront cottage in Kill Devil Hills, I'd felt nothing but elation. The real estate agent had handed me the keys with a warm smile. "First home?" she'd asked. "First home that's truly mine," I'd replied. Now, looking at the stream of notifications, I wondered if I should have kept this joy to myself. But why? Why should I hide my light just because it made others uncomfortable? I scrolled through the messages. "Mom, how could you not tell us? When did this happen? We need to talk about this. Call me immediately." Dad was more direct. "This is extremely inappropriate, Elena." Inappropriate. The word made my stomach clench. It was the same word he'd used when I'd gotten the lead in the high school play instead of focusing on college applications like Brandon. The same word when I'd chosen marketing over the business degree he'd wanted for me. The same word when I'd broken up with Tyler, the son of his golf buddy, who everyone but me thought was such a catch. My phone rang again. "Mom." I silenced it and walked back onto the porch, leaning against the railing. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in watercolor. Strokes of orange and pink. Below, waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. My shore now. I thought back to this morning. My 32nd birthday had started like any other day. I'd woken up alone in my Raleigh apartment, made coffee, checked my work emails. No birthday text from Mom or Dad, but I wasn't surprised. Last year, they'd remembered 3 days late with a hasty, belated happy birthday. Text that had clearly been an afterthought. Brandon's birthdays, however, were family events planned months in advance. Last year, for his 30th, they'd rented out an entire restaurant and flown in relatives from 3 states. I'd helped Mom with the decorations and Dad with the slideshow of Brandon's greatest hits, from his first steps to his latest real estate development. "Isn't he just remarkable?" Mom had whispered to me during the toasts, squeezing my arm. "We're so blessed." I'd nodded and smiled, wondering if she even remembered that my birthday had passed without acknowledgement just 2 weeks earlier. My phone buzzed with a new text. This one from Jasmine, my best friend. "OMG, your house is gorgeous. Happy birthday, Queen. So proud of you." At least someone remembered. I'd told no one in my family about the house. Not during the searching process, not during the bidding war I'd won, not during closing. Why would I? The conversation would have inevitably turned to how Brandon had bought his first investment property at 25, or how I should have consulted Dad since real estate is a man's domain, or how Mom had always dreamed of a beach house for the whole family. This wasn't for the whole family. This was for me. I unlocked my phone and typed a response to Jasmine. "Thank you. Having a glass of wine on the porch. Wish you were here." Then I turned off notifications for my family's messages. Tomorrow, I'd deal with them. Tonight belonged to me. I walked back into the kitchen and opened the small box from the local bakery. Inside was a cupcake with a single candle. I lit it, closed my eyes, and made a wish. Not for anything I didn't have, but for the courage to keep choosing myself, to keep building this life I was finally allowing myself to live. Happy birthday to me, I whispered, and blew out the candle. Outside, the ocean continued its constant rhythm, indifferent to the human dramas playing out on its shores. I felt something of that same indifference settling into my bones. Not coldness, but a calm certainty. For 32 years, I'd been waiting for them to see me. Today, I finally saw myself, and that made all the difference. The family crisis meeting was scheduled for Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Monteo. 5 days after my birthday post set off the nuclear explosion of family outrage. 5 days of ignored calls, terse texts, and the occasional voicemail from Mom that alternated between guilt-tripping and barely contained anger. I drove the 40 minutes from my new beach house with the windows down, letting the coastal air wash over me. My stomach knotted tighter with each mile marker that brought me closer to the Reed family homestead. The house came into view, a large colonial with pristine landscaping and the kind of curb appeal that made it perfect for the Christmas card they sent out every year. Brandon's sleek BMW was already in the driveway, parked prominently next to Dad's Range Rover. I slotted my modest Subaru beside them, feeling the familiar sense of inadequacy creep in despite my best efforts. Mom opened the door before I could knock, her face a carefully composed mask of parental concern. "Elena," she said, not quite a greeting. "We've been worried." I stepped inside, breathing in the scent of roast chicken and lemon polish. Some things never changed. "Hi, Mom. Sorry to worry you." She gave me a quick, stiff hug. Everyone's in the dining room. Everyone meant Dad and Brandon. No wives, no girlfriends, no outsiders. Just the Reed family nuclear unit, assembled like a tribunal. Dad stood when I entered, his face unreadable. Brandon remained seated, scrolling through his phone with deliberate nonchalance. "Elena?" Dad said, his tone matching Mom's. My name a statement, not a welcome. "Hi, Dad." I took my usual seat, the one that had always been mine, at the far end, slightly removed from the center of conversation. "Brandon?" My brother finally looked up. "Hey." A single syllable, dropped like a stone. Mom brought in the food, all my dad's favorites, I noticed. Roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, asparagus. Nothing I particularly loved, but then again, this wasn't really about me. We ate in silence for several excruciating minutes before Dad cleared his throat. "So," he said, setting down his fork with precision. "Would you like to, explain yourself?" I took a sip of water, buying time. "About the beach house?" "About the public spectacle," he corrected. "About announcing a major life decision on social media before consulting your family. About embarrassing us in front of everyone we know." I blinked. I wasn't aware I needed family consultation to spend my own money on my own home. Mom made a small, distressed sound. "Elena, that's not the point, and you know it. It's about how this looks." "How what looks?" "You, buying a beach house without telling us," Brandon chimed in. "Posting that caption about it being a birthday gift to yourself. Do you have any idea how that makes us look?" I set my fork down, appetite gone. "I didn't realize my birthday post was about you." Dad's face hardened. "Don't be obtuse. You deliberately made it seem like we neglect you. Don't you?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. The table went silent. Mom's hand fluttered to her throat in shock. Dad's jaw tightened. Brandon had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "How can you say that?" Mom whispered. "After everything we've done for you?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what I'd always seen, a woman who truly believed she'd been a good mother to both her children, who had no idea how differently the Reed siblings had been treated, who couldn't see what was right in front of her. "My birthday was last Tuesday," I said quietly. Mom's eyebrows knit together. "What? My birthday? It was Tuesday. None of you called, none of you texted, not even a Facebook post." Brandon shifted, uncomfortably. Dad waved dismissively. "That's what this is about? A missed birthday? Elena, we're adults now. Birthdays aren't important at our age." I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Interesting, because 3 months ago, we had a family reunion for Brandon's birthday. You flew in Aunt Carol from Phoenix." "That was different," Mom said quickly. "That was his 30th. And last year? And the year? Before? I pushed my plate away. Look, I didn't come here to argue about birthdays. I came because you asked me to. But I won't apologize for buying myself a home or for posting about it. Dad's expression darkened. This isn't about the house, Elena. It's about loyalty, family loyalty. You made us look bad publicly. By celebrating my own birthday? By implying we don't care about you. Mom burst out. I looked at each of them in turn. Do you? The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon finally broke it. That's not fair, Elena. Of course we care about you. When? I asked simply. When do you care about me? When I'm helping Mom plan your business launch parties? When I'm editing Dad's speeches? When I'm sending gift baskets to your clients? When do I ever come first in this family? Dad stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. That's enough. I won't sit here and be accused of being a bad father because we forgot a birthday. It's not about the birthday, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. It's about a lifetime of being forgotten, of being second best, of being invisible unless you need something from me. The room fell. Silent again, heavier this time. Mom was the first to recover. Elena, honey, if you felt this way, why didn't you say something? I looked at her incredulously. Mom, I've been saying it my whole life. You just weren't listening. I stood up, suddenly unable to stay a moment longer. Thank you for dinner. I should go. We're not finished discussing this, Dad said, his tone brooking no argument. But for once, I didn't care about his tone. I am. Brandon stood too. Elena, come on. Don't be dramatic. I turned to him, this golden boy who had never known what it was like to be overlooked. I'm not being dramatic, Brandon. I'm finally being honest. There's a difference. I walked to the door, my heart pounding, but my steps steady. Mom followed me, her face crumpled with confusion and hurt. Elena, please don't leave like this. We can work this out. I turned to her, suddenly exhausted. Mom, I'm not leaving forever. I'm just going home, to my home, the one that's mine. And with those words, I stepped out into the night, closing the door gently behind me. In my car, I sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. I'd expected to feel guilty or sad. Instead, I felt lighter, as if speaking my truth had removed a weight I'd been carrying for decades. I started the engine and pulled away from the house that had never truly felt like home, toward the small beach cottage that already did. Monday morning arrived with a sky full of storm clouds. Fitting, I thought, as I stared out at the churning ocean from my kitchen window. My phone had been silent since I'd left my parents. House last night, no texts, no calls, no social media notifications, the calm before another storm. I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet. In 2 hours, I'd need to log in for work. The PR firm where I'd spent the last 8 years climbing the ranks to senior account director, a position my father had once dismissed as fluff PR nonsense. Today, that fluff paid the mortgage on my beachfront property. My laptop pinged with an email notification. A message from Jasmine. Just checking in after the family dinner. You okay? Want to come over tonight? I've got wine and zero judgment. I smiled. Jasmine had been my touchstone through every Reed family drama. She knew the patterns, the wounds, the carefully maintained facades. She'd been there through college when I'd cry after my parents. Skipped parents' weekend, but drove 5 hours to see Brandon's football game. She'd been there when I graduated summa cum laude and my parents left early to attend Brandon's engagement dinner. She knew. I replied, survived. Barely. Wine sounds perfect. I'll bring takeout. Setting my mug down, I wandered into what would eventually be my home office. Currently, it held only unpacked boxes and the vintage writing desk I'd splurged on last year, my first real adult furniture purchase. On the desk sat a photo album I'd compiled over the years, a visual record of what my family refused to see. I opened it, flipping through pages of evidence. Page 1, my 5th birthday. A small cupcake with a candle, just Mom and me. Dad and Brandon were at a father-son fishing tournament. Page 10, my high. School graduation. I'm standing alone in my cap and gown while my parents adjust Brandon's tie for his senior prom, happening the same weekend. Page 15, my college graduation dinner at a local pizza place. 3 friends present. No family. They had to attend Brandon's engagement party. Page 20, my first apartment. I'm holding keys, alone, outside a modest building, juxtaposed with a family. Photo outside Brandon's first home purchase. Mom crying happy tears. Dad's arm around Brandon's shoulders. Page 30. My promotion celebration at a wine bar. Just colleagues, no family. Beside it, a newspaper clipping about Brandon's new development project, featuring quotes from my proud father. Each page told the same story. Elena Reed, the afterthought. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Elena, please call me when you get a chance. Just me. Interesting. Mom reaching out separately from Dad was unusual. The Reed family typically operated as a united front, with Dad as the undisputed general. I closed the album and picked up my phone, hesitating only briefly before dialing her number. Elena? She answered on the first ring. Thank you for calling back. Of course, Mom. I moved to the porch, needing the open air for this conversation. About last night. She paused. I've been thinking about what you said. I waited, listening to her breathing on the other end of the line. I pulled out the family calendar. She continued, her voice smaller now, and I looked back at the last few years. Your birthdays. And I owe you an apology. My breath caught. In 32 years, I couldn't remember my mother ever apologizing to me. You were right, she said. We did forget. Not just this year, but several years. I leaned against the porch railing, unsure what to say. I told myself we were just busy, she went on. That you understood, that as adults birthdays aren't that important. But then I looked at all the celebrations we've had for Brandon's birthdays and her voice caught. I don't know how I didn't see it. The ocean crashed below, filling the silence between us. Thank you for saying that, Mom, I finally managed. Your father thinks you're being unreasonable, she said, her voice regaining some of its usual composure. He says buying a house without consulting family is irresponsible. And there it was, the reason for her call. Not just an apology, but reconnaissance. Mom, I've been saving for this house for 5 years. I did my research. I got a great mortgage rate. There was nothing to consult about. But a beach house is a big decision. What if we had wanted to buy property in the same area? Now it will seem like we're copying you. I closed my eyes, counting to 5 silently. Mom, if you and Dad want a beach house, there are plenty available. My purchase doesn't affect that. But it does affect how it looks, she insisted. Everyone's talking about how you did this all on your own without family support. Because I did do it on my own. Exactly. That's the problem. I opened my eyes, watching a seagull dive into the waves. Mom, why is my independence a problem? Because, she hesitated, because that's not how our family works. We make decisions together. We present a united front. No, I corrected gently. Dad makes decisions. The rest of us present a united front. The line went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice had that brittle quality it got when she was trying not to cry. That's not fair, Elena. Maybe not, I admitted. But it's honest. Another silence stretched between us. Mom, I said. Finally, I love my house. I love that it's mine. That doesn't mean I'm rejecting the family. It just means I'm building my own life. By posting about how we forgot your birthday? The hurt in her voice was real. I sighed. The post wasn't about you. It was about me finally giving myself what I've always wanted. Recognition, celebration, a home where I feel seen. We see you, Elena, she said, quietly. Do you? Really? I asked. When was the last time you asked about my work? My friends? My dreams? When was the last time my accomplishments weren't compared to Brandon's? She didn't answer. I don't need you to be perfect, Mom, I continued. I just need you to acknowledge that I exist outside of my role as Brandon's sister or your daughter, that I'm a person in my own right. Of course you are, she said automatically. Then let me be that person. Let me celebrate my wins without making them about how they affect the family image. The line went quiet again. Finally, Mom said, I should go. Your father will be home for lunch soon. Classic Mom. Retreat when the conversation got too real. Okay, I said. Maybe I could come see the house sometime? She offered, tentatively. A small olive branch, but one I'd take. I'd like that. I'll call you, she said, and we both knew she might or might not follow through. After we hung up, I stayed on the porch, watching the storm clouds gather over the Atlantic. Something had shifted, however slightly. For the first time, my mother had heard me. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And sometimes, something is enough to start with. Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after my birthday, I woke to the sound of someone knocking on my front door. I glanced at the clock. 6:45 a.m. Too early for a casual visitor, too late for an emergency. Pulling on a robe, I padded downstairs, peering through the peephole. Brandon stood on my porch, hands in his pockets, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. I opened the door, squinting against the bright morning sun. Brandon? What are you doing here? He shifted awkwardly. Can I come in? I stepped aside, watching as my always confident brother entered my home with the caution of someone crossing a minefield. He looked around, taking in the half-unpacked boxes, the sparse furniture, the spectacular ocean view. Nice place, he said finally. Thanks, I replied, crossing my arms. What brings you here at dawn? Brandon ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I hadn't seen since we were kids. I couldn't sleep last night, after Mom told me about your conversation, so Mom had reported back. No surprise there. Want coffee? I asked, heading to the kitchen without waiting for his answer. He followed, leaning against the counter as I prepared the French press. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. I measured coffee grounds, keeping my movements deliberate. Okay. Have I been a terrible brother? The question was so unexpected that I nearly dropped the measuring spoon. I looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw something I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. Brandon Reed, golden boy, Dad's pride and joy. Mom's perfect son looked vulnerable. No, I said finally. You haven't been a terrible brother. You've been an absent one. He flinched but nodded. Fair enough. I poured hot water over the grounds, watching the coffee bloom. Why are you here, Brandon? He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small wrapped package. Happy belated birthday. I stared at the gift, making no move to take it. Is this supposed to fix things? No, he said quietly. Nothing fixes 32 years of imbalance, but it's a start. I accepted the package, feeling its weight in my palm. Thank you. Open it, he urged. I unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a small framed photograph I'd never seen before. It showed me at about 7 years old, building an elaborate sandcastle on this very beach. I was alone in the frame, intensely focused on my creation, unaware of the camera. Where did you get this? I asked, my throat suddenly tight. Found it in Mom's old albums, Brandon said. I was looking through them after Sunday night, trying to see if what you said was true. I traced the edge of the frame. And it was. He looked out at the ocean, avoiding my eyes. There are albums, full of me, every game, every award, every stupid school project. And you're just missing from most of them. Or you're in the background. Or you're the one taking the photo. I set the picture down, unsure what to say. Brandon continued. I never noticed. That's the worst part. I just accepted that the spotlight was mine. I never questioned why. It wasn't your job to question it, I said. You were a kid too. But I'm not a kid anymore, he countered. And I've been thinking about it all week. About how I can't remember the last time I called you just to check in. About how at family dinners, Dad asks about my work, my investments, my future plans. And you just sit there. I poured the coffee into 2 mugs, buying time to steady my emotions. Here's the thing, Brandon. I don't need you to feel guilty. I don't want pity. I just want to be seen. I see you now, he said simply. And I'm sorry it took so long. I handed him a mug. Why did it take so long? Honestly. He considered the question, cradling the coffee between his palms. I think it was easier not to see it, to accept the story that I was the special one, the successful one. It felt good to be the center of the Reed family universe. And looking back, I think Mom and Dad needed that story too. Why? Because it's the only one they know how to tell. He took a sip of coffee. Dad grew up with a father who only valued achievement. Mom's whole identity is wrapped up in being the perfect mother of the perfect son. They poured everything into me because that's what their parents did with their brothers. It's a cycle. I leaned against the counter, absorbing his words. A cycle I broke by buying this house. Exactly. He gave me a rueful smile. You disrupted the narrative. You created your own story without asking permission, and that terrifies them. We moved to the porch, sitting in the Adirondack chairs facing the ocean. The morning was perfect. Clear blue sky, gentle waves, seagulls wheeling overhead. So what happens now? I asked. Brandon shrugged. I don't know. Dad's still angry. He thinks you're being rebellious and childish. And Mom? Confused, hurt, But I think she's starting to get it. I nodded, watching the waves. And you? What do you think? He turned to me, his expression serious. I think my little sister bought herself a badass beach house. And I'm proud. Of her. A laugh escaped me, small, but genuine. Thanks. I mean it, he insisted. You've built an amazing career. You've saved and invested. You did this on your own terms. That's impressive, Elena. The simple acknowledgement, something I'd craved for years, washed over me like a warm wave. There's something else, Brandon said, setting down his mug. I've been thinking about Thanksgiving. I groaned. It's only May. I know, but Mom's already planning. She wants to host at her house, like always. But I was thinking, what if we did it here instead? I blinked, stunned. Here? At my house? Why not? It's beautiful. There's plenty of space, and it would be a way for the family to acknowledge your achievement, to celebrate you. Dad would never agree to that. Brandon's expression hardened slightly. Then Dad can stay home. Mom and I will come. I stared at him, this version of my brother I'd never seen before, one who would choose me over keeping the peace. Think about it, he said, standing up. I should get going. Early meeting. I walked him to the door, still processing our conversation. Elena, he said, pausing on the threshold, I can't change the past 32 years, but I can be a better brother going forward, if you'll let me. I hugged him, the first real hug we'd shared in years. I'd like that. As I watched him drive away, I picked up the framed photo he'd brought. Little Elena, building her castle alone, unaware of being forgotten in that moment. I placed it on my mantle, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as evidence of what I'd always been. A builder, creating beauty even when no one was watching. Now, finally, someone was. 2 weeks after Brandon's surprise visit, my beach house was finally starting to feel like home. I'd unpacked the last boxes, hung artwork on the walls, and arranged my furniture to maximize the ocean views. Each decision felt like an affirmation. This space is mine. These choices are mine. This life is mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Housewarming party this weekend? I'll handle the invites if you handle the food. I smiled, typing back. Perfect. Saturday at 4. Keep it small, just our closest friends. Setting my phone down, I walked through the rooms, running my fingers along surfaces I had chosen, paid for, loved. The writing desk positioned by the window where I could watch the waves while working. The oversized armchair perfect for reading. The kitchen island where I'd already hosted 2 impromptu wine nights with neighbors. My neighbor to the north, Ms. Geraldine Palmer, a 70-something retired literature professor, had become an unexpected friend. She'd appeared at my door the day after I moved in, carrying a homemade quilt and a bottle of whiskey. Welcome to the neighborhood. Honey, she'd said, pressing both items into my hands. The quilt is for cold nights. The whiskey is for hard days. Both are necessities for beach living. I'd invited her in, and 3 hours later, we were still talking. About books, about the ocean, about starting over. She'd bought her beach house after her husband died, she told me. Best decision I ever made. Some people thought I was running away. I knew I was running toward something. The memory made me smile as I headed upstairs to my home office. Work had been my sanctuary through all the family drama, the one place where my achievements were recognized, my voice was heard, my opinions mattered. I opened my laptop to a flood of emails. Most were routine client communications, but one from my boss, Catherine, caught my attention. Elena, the Westridge Hotel's campaign presentation was outstanding. The client has decided to double their budget with us for next year. They specifically mentioned your strategic vision as the deciding factor. I'd like to discuss your role expanding to oversee our entire hospitality division. Let's talk tomorrow. Champagne will be involved. I read the email twice, a warm glow spreading through my chest. This was the promotion I'd been working toward for the past year, a significant step up in both responsibility and compensation. I'd be leading a team of 8, managing our biggest client portfolio. Without thinking, I reached for my phone to call my parents. The impulse surprised me. After everything, my first instinct was still to share good news with them. I hesitated, thumb hovering over my mother's contact. What would happen if I called? My father would ask how much the promotion was worth, then make a comment about how Brandon's latest development project was valued at millions. My mother would say something like, "That's nice, dear," before changing the subject to something Brandon related. I put the phone down. This win was mine to celebrate in my own way. Instead, I texted, Jasmine, just got offered a huge promotion. Hospitality Division Director, champagne tonight? Her response was immediate. Hell yes! I'll be there at 7 with bubbly and Thai food. So proud of you. The doorbell rang, startling me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Looking through the peephole, I was shocked to see my mother standing on the porch, alone, clutching her purse like a shield. I opened the door. Mom, what are you doing here? She looked smaller somehow, less certain than usual. I said I wanted to see your house. Is this a bad time? No, come in. I stepped aside, watching as she entered, her eyes taking in every detail. It's lovely, Elena, she said, her voice soft with what sounded like genuine admiration. The view is spectacular. Thank you. I led her to the living room. Would you like some tea? That would be nice. While I prepared the tea, Mom wandered around, examining my bookshelves, my artwork, the framed photo Brandon had given me. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, she was standing at the window, gazing out at the ocean. Brandon's been talking to me, she said without turning around, about how we've treated you over the years. I set the mugs down, on the coffee table, unsure how to respond. He showed me that photo album you have, she continued, the one with all the side-by-side comparisons. My stomach tightened. That album was private, a personal record of my invisibility. The fact that Brandon had shown it to her felt like a betrayal. I wasn't keeping score, Mom, I said finally. I was keeping evidence, for myself, so I wouldn't think I was crazy. She turned to face me, her eyes red-rimmed. You're not crazy, Elena. You're right. The simple admission knocked the air from my lungs. Mom sat down, cradling her tea. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our phone call. About patterns, about choices. She took a sip, gathering herself. Did you know my sister was the star of our family? Charlotte. She was beautiful, talented, perfect. I blinked, surprised by this turn. Mom rarely talked about her childhood or her sister, who had died before I was born. My parents doted on her, Mom continued. I was always Charlotte's sister, never Evelyn, just an extension of her. I didn't know that, I said quietly. When I had you and Brandon, I swore I'd never favor one child over the other. Her laugh was hollow. And then I did exactly that. I just switched the roles. Instead of being the overlooked daughter, I became the mother who overlooked her daughter. The honesty was startling. In all my years of feeling invisible, I'd never considered that my mother might understand the feeling intimately. Why Brandon? I asked, the question that had haunted me for decades. Mom stared into her tea. Because he was a boy. Because your father needed a son to be proud of. Because it was easier to pour everything into him than to fight the pattern. She looked up at me. Those aren't excuses, Elena. They're just the truth. We sat in silence, the weight of her words settling between us. I got a promotion today, I said finally. I'm going to be director of the hospitality division. Mom's face brightened. Elena, that's wonderful. Tell me about it. So I did. I told her about the Westridge campaign, about the strategy I'd developed, about the team I'd be leading, and for the first time I could remember, she listened. Really listened, without comparing my achievements to Brandon's, without minimizing my success. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. I'm proud of you, she said, simply. 3 words I'd waited a lifetime to hear. Thank you, I whispered. Your father won't change overnight, she warned. He may never change completely. I know, but I want to try, she said. To see you, to really see you. I squeezed her hand. That's all I've ever wanted. As the afternoon light slanted through the windows, my mother and I sat talking, really talking, for perhaps my first time. We spoke of her childhood in the shadow of a perfect sister, of my years feeling invisible, of Brandon's complicated role as both beneficiary and victim of our family's dysfunctional dynamics. When she finally rose to leave, Mom looked around once more. You've created something beautiful here, Elena. Not just the house, but the life. You should be proud. I walked her to the door, a strange new feeling expanding in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly. That would take time. Not healing. That was a longer road. But understanding. The beginning of something new. As I watched her drive away, I realized, sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you end up with. Sometimes, with courage and honesty, it can become something better. The housewarming party was in full swing, with 20 of my closest friends scattered throughout the beach house and spilling onto the deck. Jasmine had outdone herself with the guest list. Colleagues who'd supported me through years of thankless work, neighbors who'd welcomed me to the beach community, friends who'd been there through every Reed family drama. Ms. Geraldine held court in the living room, regaling younger guests with stories of her days as a radical feminist literature professor in the 1970s. My coworkers clustered around the kitchen island, mixing cocktails and debating the merits of beachfront versus soundside properties. On the deck, Jasmine was leading an impromptu dance party to 80s hits. I moved through the rooms, topping off wine glasses and accepting congratulations on both the house and my promotion. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely seen, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. "Speech," someone called out as I entered the living room. Others took up the chant, "Speech! Speech!" Jasmine appeared at my side, pressing a glass of champagne into my hand. "They want words of wisdom from the birthday girl/homeowner/newly minted director." I laughed, stepping onto the small coffee table as the room quieted. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with me today," I began. "This house represents more than just a real estate investment. It's the first place that's ever been completely mine." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. "For a long time, I waited for permission to take up space in the world," I continued. "I waited for a validation that never came. I dimmed my light to make others comfortable." I raised my glass. "No more waiting, no more dimming. This is my space, my light, my life, and I'm so grateful to share it with people who see me clearly." "Here, here," Jasmine called, raising her glass. As everyone drank to the toast, the doorbell rang. Probably late arrivals. Jasmine had mentioned a few people might not make it until evening. I weaved through the crowd to the front door, still smiling from the warmth of the moment. Opening it, I froze in surprise. My father stood on the porch, stiff and uncomfortable in a polo shirt and khakis, his version of casual wear. Behind him, Brandon and Mom waited, looking equally uncertain. "Dad," I managed. "I wasn't expecting you." He cleared his throat. "Your mother said you were having a gathering. We thought we might stop by." His eyes moved past me to the crowded living room, the laughter, the celebration happening without the Reed family's involvement or approval. I hesitated, torn between closing the door and letting them in. This party was my sanctuary, filled with people who genuinely cared about me. Did I want to risk the family dynamic poisoning? Brandon stepped forward. "We brought wine," he offered, holding up a bottle of my favorite Cabernet. "And Dad has something he'd like to say." Mom placed a hand on Dad's arm, giving him a meaningful look. He straightened, meeting my eyes directly. "May we come in, Elena?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. I stepped aside. Of course. They entered, clearly uncomfortable, with the lively scene before them. Ms. Geraldine noticed them first, her eyes narrowing slightly as she recognized them from my descriptions. Jasmine spotted them next, immediately making her way to my side like a bodyguard. "Everything okay?" she whispered. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. "Everyone, this is my family," I announced to the room. "My parents, Robert and Evelyn Reed, and my brother, Brandon." A chorus of greetings rose from the crowd, warm but slightly reserved. My friends knew enough about my family situation to be protective. "Beautiful home," Dad said stiffly, looking around. "Very beachy." Coming from him, it was almost a compliment. "Thank you," I replied. "Would you like a tour?" As I led them through the house, showing off the ocean views, the carefully chosen furniture, the office where I'd already begun working on my expanded client portfolio, I watched my father's face. He was seeing me, really seeing me, perhaps for the first time. Not as an extension of the Reed family, but as Elena, homeowner, professional, independent woman. When we reached the deck, he paused, staring out at the ocean. "Your mother tells me you've been promoted," he said. "Finally." "Yes, I'm now director of the hospitality division." He nodded, still looking at the water. "That's significant. How many people will you manage?" 8 directly, about 20 indirectly through various projects." Another nod. "And the salary increase?" Typical Dad, always reducing accomplishments to their monetary value. But this time, I didn't mind. In his language, money equaled success. 30% base increase plus expanded bonus potential. He turned to me, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "That's substantial." "Yes, it is." We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the party filtering through the open doors behind us. Elena, he said finally, your mother and Brandon have helped me see that I've been less than fair in how I've acknowledged your accomplishments over the years. Coming from Robert Reed, this was practically a tearful confession. I appreciate you saying that, Dad. He straightened, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional territory. The house is a good investment. Beachfront property in this area has appreciated at an average of 8% annually over the past decade. I suppressed a smile. Of course he'd researched it. Yes, I did my homework. You always were thorough, he said, and I realized with a start that it was the first genuine compliment he'd given me in years. Thank you. He cleared his throat again. Your mother mentioned that Brandon suggested we hold Thanksgiving here this year. I tensed slightly. He mentioned the idea, yes. I think it's a good one, Dad said, surprising me. If you're amenable. Before I could respond, Brandon and Mom joined us on the deck. Did you ask her? Brandon prompted. Dad nodded. I was just getting to that. Mom stepped forward. Elena, we were hoping you might consider hosting Thanksgiving this year. Here, at your beautiful home. The request hung in the air between us. A year ago, I would have jumped at the chance to finally be at the center of a family gathering, to have them acknowledge my space, my achievement. Now, I found myself hesitating. I'd need to think about it, I said honestly. This is still very new for me, having my own space, setting my own boundaries. Dad frowned slightly, but Mom nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. Brandon caught my eye, giving me a subtle nod of support. He understood what this meant, that I was no longer automatically saying yes to family requests, no longer prioritizing their comfort over my own. I'd like to rejoin my guests, I said gently, but thank you for coming. It means a lot. As we walked back inside, I introduced them to Ms. Geraldine, to my colleagues, to the community I'd built for myself. I watched as they navigated this world that existed completely, separate from the Reed family ecosystem, a world where Elena was central, valued, celebrated. They stayed for an hour, awkward but trying. When they left, Dad shook my hand formally, Mom hugged me, and Brandon whispered, "Proud of you," in my ear. Standing on the porch, watching them drive away, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, hope and wariness, gratitude and caution, the weight of history and the possibility of change. Jasmine appeared beside me, slipping an arm around my waist. You okay? I nodded. I think so. You know you don't have to host Thanksgiving if you don't want to, right? Your boundaries matter. I smiled at her, grateful for her protective instincts. I know, but maybe it's time for a new tradition, one where I'm not at the kids' table anymore. We rejoined the party, where people who truly saw me were waiting. As the sun set over the Atlantic, casting golden light across my living room, I realized this was what I'd been looking for all along. Not just recognition from my family, but the courage to create a life where I was visible, valued, and whole, with or without their approval. That was the real gift I'd given myself. Thanksgiving morning dawned with perfect clarity, crisp autumn air, cloudless blue sky, and the Atlantic stretching calm and infinite beyond my kitchen windows. I'd been up since 5 a.m., prepping the turkey, chopping vegetables, and arranging flowers for the centerpiece of the dining table I'd positioned to maximize the ocean view. The decision to host Thanksgiving hadn't come easily. After the housewarming party, I'd spent weeks weighing the potential rewards against the risks. Could my family truly change their patterns? Could I maintain my boundaries while welcoming them into my space? Was I setting myself up for disappointment? Jasmine had been skeptical. They've had 32 years to see you, she'd pointed out. What makes you think a beach house and a turkey will change that? She wasn't wrong, but something had shifted. In me, in them, in the space between us. Small changes, perhaps, but real ones. Mom called regularly now, asking about my work, my house, my life. Brandon stopped by at least once a week, sometimes just to sit on my deck and watch the sunset with me. Even Dad had made an effort, emailing me articles about property investment and beach house maintenance, his love language expressed through practical advice. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't complete, but it was movement in a direction I'd never thought possible. So I'd said yes to Thanksgiving, with conditions. I would host, I would cook, I would set the table and make the rules. This would be Thanksgiving at Elena's house, not a Reed family production transported to a different location. Now, as I slid the turkey into the oven, I felt a flutter of nervousness. What if today went badly? What if old patterns reasserted themselves? What if a knock at the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts? Too early for family. They weren't due until noon. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer. Miss Geraldine stood on my porch holding a pie. "Happy Thanksgiving, honey. Thought I'd bring this over early so it could cool properly." I smiled, touched by her thoughtfulness. "Thank you. That's so kind. Pecan pie, my mother's recipe." She handed it over. "How are you feeling about today?" "Nervous," I admitted, setting the pie on the counter. "Would you like some coffee?" "Love some." She settled at my kitchen island, watching as I poured 2 mugs. Family gatherings have a way of bringing out our deepest insecurities. I nodded, adding cream to her coffee just how she liked it. I keep telling myself it's just one day. If it goes badly, I never have to do it again. True. She took a sip. But I have a feeling it won't go badly. Why's that? Because you're not the same Elena who let herself be forgotten, she said simply. That girl is gone. This woman, she gestured to me, flour-dusted and confident in my own kitchen, knows her worth. I smiled, feeling the truth of her words settle into my bones. Thank you for that. Besides, she added with a mischievous grin, if they act up, just come get me. I've got plenty of embarrassing stories about their generation to put them in their place. I laughed. I might take you up on that. After Ms. Geraldine left, I returned to my preparations with renewed purpose. By 11, the house smelled of roasting turkey and simmering cranberries. I'd set the table with care, my grandmother's china that Mom had given me years ago, the one good thing I'd inherited, crystal glasses I'd splurged on last week, and a tablecloth hand-embroidered by Ms. Geraldine as a housewarming gift. At the center of the table, I'd placed a simple arrangement of beach grasses and late-season wildflowers in a blue glass vase. No elaborate floral displays like Mom always insisted on. No formal place cards. No fussy decorations. Just simple, elegant beauty. My style, not theirs. Brandon arrived first, early as promised to help with last-minute preparations. He carried in a case of wine and a small gift bag. "Happy Thanksgiving," he said, kissing my cheek. "The place looks amazing." "Thanks." I accepted the wine gratefully. "What's in the bag?" He handed it to me with a slightly nervous smile. "Just a little something." Inside was a small silver frame containing a photo I'd never seen. Brandon and me as children, maybe 6 and 8, building a sandcastle together on this very beach. We were laughing, covered in sand, clearly having the time of our lives. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my throat tight with sudden emotion. "Dad's old slides. I had them digitized." He shrugged, trying to seem casual. "Thought you might want it for your collection." I hugged him, this brother who was trying so hard to make amends. "It's perfect. Thank you." We worked side by side in the kitchen, a new experience for both of us. Brandon had never been much of a cook, but he followed my instructions willingly, mashing potatoes and stirring gravy with surprising competence. "Remember that Thanksgiving when I dropped the pumpkin pie?" he asked, laughing at the memory. "Mom nearly had a heart attack," I recalled. "Dad made us drive 40 minutes to find a replacement." "You were the one who saved the day," Brandon said, his tone suddenly serious. "You always were. Smoothing things over, fixing problems, making everything work while the rest of us took the credit." I paused in my vegetable arranging, surprised by his insight. "That was my role." "Not anymore," he said firmly. "Today, you're the host. We're the guests. You set the rules." The doorbell rang before I could respond. Mom and Dad had arrived, right on time. Dad carried a bouquet of fall flowers, store-bought but thoughtfully selected. Mom held a bakery box containing, she explained, Brandon's favorite cheesecake. "And these," she added, pulling out a smaller box, "are the chocolate truffles you always loved as a girl. Remember? From that little shop in Monteo?" I did remember. I'd mentioned those truffles once, maybe 15 years ago. The fact that she'd recalled this detail had gone out of her way to find them meant more than I could express. "Thank you," I said simply, accepting both gifts. We moved to the living room, where I'd set out appetizers and champagne. Dad looked around, noting the changes I'd made since their last visit. New artwork, rearranged furniture, the built-in bookshelves I'd had installed. "The place is coming together nicely," he said, which from him was high praise. "Property values in this area are up 12% since you purchased." I smiled, recognizing this as his way of saying, "Good job." "The investment aspect is just a bonus," I told him. "I bought it for the sunrises." He nodded, following my gaze to the windows overlooking the ocean. "Can't put a price on that view?" We settled into conversation that was, if not entirely comfortable, at least civil. Mom asked thoughtful questions about my work. Dad shared news about local development without once mentioning how Brandon could have gotten me a better deal. Brandon kept the wine flowing and the conversation moving whenever it threatened to stall. When we finally sat down to dinner, the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the table. I looked at the faces of my family, these people who had overlooked me for so long, who were trying, in their imperfect ways, to see me now. "I'd like to say something before we eat," I said, standing at the head of the table, my table, in my house, on my terms. They fell silent, waiting. 6 months ago, I celebrated my birthday alone. I bought myself a cupcake, made a wish, and decided it was time to stop waiting for validation from others. I raised my glass. That decision led me here, to this house, to this moment, to a new understanding of family. Mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Dad looked uncomfortably emotional. Brandon nodded encouragingly. "I'm grateful for this house," I continued, "for my career, for friends who've been my chosen family through difficult times, and I'm grateful that we're all trying to build something new together, something more balanced, more honest." I looked at each of them in turn. "Welcome to my home. I'm glad you're here." We clinked glasses, the sound bright and hopeful in the sunlit room. As we began to eat, passing dishes and complimenting flavors, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This wasn't perfect reconciliation, it wasn't complete healing, but it was a beginning. A new tradition taking root, one where I wasn't invisible, where my voice was heard, where my space was respected. For now, that was enough. 1 year after my forgotten birthday and the beach house that changed everything, I stood on my deck at dawn, watching the first light touch the Atlantic. My 33rd birthday had arrived with none of the pain or invisibility of years past. The previous evening, I'd hosted a small dinner party. My parents, Brandon and his new girlfriend Maya, Jasmine and her husband, and Ms. Geraldine. We'd eaten on the deck, lanterns glowing against the darkening sky, conversation flowing as naturally as the wine. Mom had presented me with a photo album she'd spent months creating, images of me from childhood to present, carefully curated to show a life well lived. Dad had given me a first edition of my favorite novel, proving he'd been paying attention when I mentioned it months ago. Brandon and Maya had brought a cake from my favorite bakery in Raleigh. No one had forgotten, no one had minimized, no one had compared me to Brandon or found me wanting. Now, as the sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I reflected on the year that had passed, a year of growth, of boundaries, of healing. My promotion had exceeded all expectations. Under my leadership, the hospitality division had secured 3 major new clients, expanded our team, and increased revenue by 38%. Catherine had hinted at a partnership track in my future, something I'd never dared to dream of before. The beach house had become not just a home, but a sanctuary. I'd added a garden in the back, installed a fire pit for cool evenings, and created an outdoor workspace where I could answer emails while listening to the waves. Property values had indeed risen, as Dad frequently reminded me, but the real value was in the peace I'd found here. My relationship with my family had evolved, not into perfect harmony, but into something more honest, more balanced. There were still difficult moments, old patterns that threatened to resurface, wounds that hadn't fully healed. Dad still occasionally compared my achievements to Brandon's. Mom still sometimes slipped into treating me as an afterthought. But now I had the courage to point these behaviors out, to hold them accountable, to maintain my boundaries. And they were trying. Really, trying. Brandon had become not just a brother, but a friend. He stopped by regularly, sometimes to help with home projects, sometimes just to talk. We'd begun to build the relationship we should have had all along, one based on mutual respect rather than the artificial hierarchy our parents had created. Mom called weekly, asking genuine questions about my life, listening to my answers. She'd started therapy, she told me recently, to understand why she'd perpetuated the same patterns that had hurt her as a child. Even Dad had made progress in his own stubborn way. He'd never be emotionally demonstrative, but he'd found ways to show he cared, sending articles he thought would interest me, recommending financial strategies, asking my opinion on business matters. Small gestures, but meaningful. Ones. The most surprising change, though, was in me. I no longer measured my worth by their recognition. I no longer diminished myself to make them comfortable. I no longer waited for permission to take up space in the world. I had become my own witness, my own champion, my own home. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Happy birthday, Queen. Ready for our spa day?" I smiled, typing back. "Can't wait. Meet you there at 10. Setting my phone down, I wrapped myself in Ms. Geraldine's quilt and settled into my favorite deck chair to watch the morning unfold. A movement on the beach caught my eye. A solitary figure walking along the shoreline, familiar even at this distance. Brandon. He often walked this stretch of beach on his morning runs. I waved and he changed course, heading toward my house. Minutes later, he bounded up the deck stairs, breathless and smiling. "Happy birthday, sis," he said, dropping into the chair beside me. "Thought I might find you out here." "Best place to start the day," I agreed, offering him a corner of the quilt against the morning chill. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves, the seabirds, the endless sky. "You know what I was thinking about on my run?" he asked finally. "What's that?" "How different everything is from a year ago." He turned to me, his expression serious. "You changed us, Elena. All of us. By finally choosing yourself." I considered his words. "I didn't set out to change anyone but myself. That's why it worked," he said simply. "You weren't trying to punish us or teach us a lesson. You were just finally living your truth, and it forced us to see ours." The sun had fully risen now, illuminating the beach in clear morning light. Down the shore, a lighthouse stood bright white against the blue sky, a navigational aid, a warning, a beacon of safety. "I used to think being seen by you all was what I wanted most in the world," I said slowly. "But what I really needed was to see myself clearly, to recognize my own worth, independent of anyone else's validation." Brandon nodded. "You became your own lighthouse." I smiled at the apt metaphor. "I guess I did." "Well, lighthouse," he said, standing and extending his hand to help me up. "What's on the birthday agenda today?" "Spa day with Jasmine. Dinner with friends tonight. Nothing elaborate." "Sounds perfect." He hugged me. A real hug. The kind we'd rarely shared growing up. "I should get going. Maya's waiting for me back at the house." I walked him to the steps. "Thanks for stopping by. Wouldn't miss it." He paused, looking back at me. "You know, I used to think you were the lucky one." "Me?" I laughed in surprise. "While you were the golden child? You were free," he said simply. "I was trapped in their expectations, their dreams for me. You got to build your own life while I was busy living the one they'd planned." I'd never considered it from that perspective, that the family spotlight I'd craved had been its own kind of prison for Brandon. "We're both free now," I said softly. He nodded, a smile breaking across his face. "See you tonight at dinner." As I watched him jog back down the beach, I thought about the unexpected gifts of this past year, not just the house or the promotion, but the deeper treasures: self-worth, boundaries, truth. I went inside to prepare for my birthday celebrations, pausing to straighten the framed photo on my mantle. Little Elena building her sandcastle, now joined by the image of Brandon and me building one together. Evidence that I had never been as alone as I'd thought, that connections could be rebuilt, that it's never too late to rewrite your story. Later, as I locked up to leave for my spa appointment, I glanced back at my house, this beautiful space I'd created for myself. The morning sun glinted off the windows, making the whole structure shine like a beacon against the blue backdrop of sky and sea. My own lighthouse, guiding me home. I no longer needed my family to remember my birthday to feel worthy of celebration. I no longer needed their approval to know my own value. I no longer needed their recognition to take pride in my achievements. But when they offered these things freely, authentically, I could accept them with grace, not as validation of my worth, but as affirmation of our growth. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't what others give you. It's finally giving yourself permission to stop waiting for their love and start living your own truth. And that, I discovered, was a gift worth celebrating every single day.